back on NFL Daily. Yes, Shook, this has happened a couple times. Whenever we think it's going to be a bad Thursday night game, I'm like, hey, we got to give the people a little red meat. We got to give them what they want. Let's do some power rankings. And then that Thursday night game turns out to be a banger. But you know what? Why not have two big slices of big red meat? I don't care. I'm getting old. Does that even make sense?
I had a really good steak like 2 nights ago at Marble Room in Cleveland. Like, it's a great place. And fresh off of tasting that fantastic steak, yes, let's give them all the red meat.
I eat way too much red meat, and I never regret it. Let's do the power rankings, bottom to top, and we'll speed through the bottom teams because they have been out of it for a while. The bottom quartile. Number 32, the Las Vegas Raiders. We were in complete agreement on that they are now the worst team in the NFL. Congratulations to Tom Brady and what you've done. The Tennessee Titans at 31, Jets 30. The Commanders, man, if we had seen this at the beginning of the season, shook that the Commanders are the 29th best team in the NFL. My God. The Giants at 28, Cardinals 27. Man, that's sad. You had them a few spots lower than me. Browns at 26. And here's just a little light pat on the back for the New Orleans Saints. Why don't you give the Saints some love? Hey, you're only the 8th worst team in the NFL, according to me and Shook.
I mean, if it was like a month and a half ago, they probably would have been 30th here. So congrats, You've climbed 5 spots, and it's because you've been spunky. You've been, scrappy in your last few games. You beat the Buccaneers, you beat the Panthers in a weird game in week 10, and you had a close loss to the Dolphins in week 13. Good on you, Tyler Shuck. Keep balling, man. I honestly, Greg, I know we're not going to divert too much here, but I actually think Tyler Shuck has the goods. He just needs reps. Like, I like what I've seen from him so far.
Okay. And if there was one team in this bottom 8 you wouldn't want to play, I mean, I guess in theory, according to our rankings, it's the Saints. To me, it'd probably be the Browns.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's something about that just because of their defense. And then the Cardinals are just good enough to lose against a decent team. At least they were. Let's go to the next quartile because those teams have been dead forever. The order of it doesn't matter too much to me. We have the Falcons here at 24. Now, we kind of assumed going into it that they're going to lose this game. Maybe we should bump them up a spot over the Vikings, who are 23. But I wouldn't put them any higher just because they made this comeback. The Colts all the way down at 22. Let's stop there. We have the Colts below teams like the Dolphins, Bengals, Panthers. What was your thought process here of where this Colts team is at, and how sad is it that we had them in the top 5, 8 weeks ago, and now they're down at 22?
Well, when we did that, most likely who we could see, getting to the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, God, that aged poorly for me, putting the Colts that high. But I mean, this just speaks to the value of a quarterback. It reminds me of the college football playoff when they decided to leave undefeated Florida State out because they didn't have Jordan Travis because he had suffered a season-ending leg injury. It's the same thing. Your quarterback's out, and we've seen how they struggled even with injured Daniel Jones with that leg fracture for a couple weeks before he got hurt. Now, this could also age really poorly if Phillip Rivers authors the greatest Disney movie we've ever seen and comes out and balls out for them, but it's not going to happen. So
and I think that helps explain why the Bengals are even as high as 20, because Joe Burrow is playing football and he's playing it incredibly. I finally got to that Bills game and man, he was so good in that game. Josh Allen was even better because Josh Allen didn't have that Benford play, unfortunately, for Burrow, which is more of a great defensive play than anything. But that was just awesome. I would change the rankings and put the Buccaneers now below the Steelers and the Ravens. So we have the Steelers at 17, the Ravens at 18, the Panthers at 19. But just kind of talk about that group, because it's depressing to me that those two AFC North teams are right there, and we basically agreed on them, with the Panthers kind of in a category also with the Bucs is two of these teams are going to make the playoffs, but they're not even among the best 14 teams in the NFL.
No, they're not. And it speaks to the poor quality of both the NFC South and the AFC North. I mean, we have 3 AFC North teams in this group. It just tells you how bad the division is, or just how mid the division is. And we got the mid off already last weekend between the Steelers and the Ravens. Steelers coming out on top in that one, but none of these teams look strong. None of these teams I look at and go,
Super Bowl pick.
They're going to go
Ravens
win.
This bad? Everyone else makes sense, but the fact that I'm willing to drop them this low in the power rankings when their defense, the numbers would tell you it's been pretty good over the last few months, although I have my doubts about it. Like a team quarterbacked by Lamar Jackson. It's one of the most disappointing seasons by any team in a long time. And I feel like it's weirdly slipped under the radar because Lamar missed that time, and you can kind of blame it on his hamstring. But to me, there's more that's rotten there than just that. It's really disappointing.
So the way I kind of want to frame this group is like, if you pit the Bengals against the Steelers or Ravens right now, who are you picking in that game? Because I know who I'm picking, and it's not the Steelers or the Ravens. Like, just based on how they've played over the last month. And I also
good point.
Yeah,
well, we should have the Bengals higher then, if that's the case, or at least you did, maybe.
But like, we're looking at total product. I guess power rankings is like who you'd take on a neutral field or whatever right now. But I also look at the Ravens and Steelers, and I think if there was any team that's going to climb out of this group, I believe it's probably the Ravens. And because Lamar looked a little bit better last week, he had more mobility, he looked more like himself. Their defense is just very hit or miss right now. After having a relatively strong couple of weeks, it's hard to predict who they are. Kind of like it's hard to predict who the Panthers are going to be from week to week. And I think if Lamar can continue to get closer to who he is, then they could elevate. My other issue with them is that Derrick Henry, I hate to say it, Father Time looks like it's starting to hit him. He's just not very effective right now, and that's kind of hurting their entire offense, especially with a relatively immobile Lamar Jackson.
You know who else is hitting him? Like all the free rushers that Daniel Falele just watches run by. But you're right. I agree that Derrick Henry doesn't look good. Let's bring up the next graphic, Chris, of the next 16 teams. And yes, I would knock the Buccaneers now below this Steelers, Ravens, even the Panthers team. It's been too long of a stretch. So we have the Chiefs at 15, the Cowboys at 14, and the Eagles at 13. Let's actually throw up your QB index rankings. Now, I know Joe Burrow was the biggest riser on the QB index rankings this week. It is time for Quarterback Keeper, presented by Snapdragon. But I was curious to see where Dak Prescott was on your list. And if Patrick Mahomes was in your top 10, I just want to give you the floor for the moment that Patrick Mahomes is just not even in your top 10. Shook, where is he right now, and what do you have to say for yourself?
He is 12th right now. He dropped 7 spots, and I think that sometimes in this process, a ranking can really reflect a couple of weeks, and I think that applies to Patrick Mahomes. The reason is that I believe that I've had about the most faith of anybody in Mahomes' ability to overcome challenges around him and lead his team to victory. He's done it for multiple years. He was a big reason why they got to the Super Bowl last year. He's not doing that anymore. We can talk about the 3 interceptions. We could talk about the 10 straight incompletions in the game against Houston, but it's more than that. He's just not doing the things that he did before. His scrambling, his play extending, the ball, the way it's coming out of his hand, just like has a nosedive to it. He just doesn't look like himself, and it doesn't help him that people aren't catching passes on the other end either. So I felt like this was a bit of a course correction over a few weeks of performance, maybe even going back to Thanksgiving, that loss to the Cowboys. And when I look at the performance of some of these quarterbacks that are in the top 10, and I measure them against Mahomes over the last month or so, and really over the whole season, I'm just thinking, look, late season, these guys are building momentum. They deserve to be in this top 10 more than Mahomes. He needs to fall out of the top 10 for the first time in the history of me doing QB Index. But I wasn't going to move Dak because we know that Dak is the engine that makes the Cowboys offense go. And it doesn't matter if it's CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens or Ryan Flournoy, who's out there. He's continuing to throw them into games. Yes, they lost to Detroit. Yes, he had a couple of turnovers. They were contested balls. It wasn't really entirely his fault. I still believe he deserves to be in the top 5.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you absolutely there. The Mahomes thing's interesting. Now, you having Trevor Lawrence ahead of him, that's too far. It's crazy. Trevor Lawrence has played great the last 2 weeks, but to me, the rest of the season outweighs significantly for Mahomes. Who do you have at 11? Because everyone else in your top 10, I actually would not have any problem with there. You have Darnold, Love, who is maybe an MVP candidate, Herbert, and Jared Goff, Josh Allen, May, and Stafford is still atop your rankings. It's just crazy because when you think about like Breeze and Manning, maybe Breeze had like one season, but especially the Peyton Manning or the Tom Brady's of it all, there were no seasons where at the end of the season you could say he was not a top 8 quarterback. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there with Mahomes. We have another month to go.
Yeah.
The Chiefs, though, at 15, wild. Well, we have the Cowboys ahead of them. Of course, they won that game head to head. We have the Eagles now at 13, which I think feels right. To me, this section, 49ers at 9. We like the 49ers on NFL Daily. Chargers at 10, Bears 11, Jaguars 12, and Eagles 13. It's really interesting because I think this is a group of teams where if you told their fan bases right now, you're going to win a playoff game, they'd say, okay, I'd take it. That's pretty good. Like, we're in the final 8. We're in the divisional round. Like, that alone would be a good outcome for this Philadelphia Eagles team, which really shows how far they've fallen.
It'd be a good outcome for the Bears. It'd be a good outcome for the Jags. It might even be at this point a good outcome for the Chargers. But
get the playoff monkey off Herbert's back. To me, that would be like when Lamar won his first playoff game. Just at least get one in, and especially a season where you don't have your 2 tackles. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, but to answer your question about who was at 11, it was Brock Purdy, who was on a bye, which is why I couldn't really justify moving him around much. Now, on second examination, I probably would have put Mahomes at 11 and Purdy at 12. Now that I've had a chance to reflect after firing it off, but the Niners standing in the power rankings kind of justifies it. Like, they've pieced together their defense, and yes, they don't have a pass rush, but they've performed well enough to limit, the Panthers and Bryce Young to a nightmarish performance in prime time. And they continue to win games. And Purdy's most recent game, which is a win over the Browns, the numbers don't reflect it, but he made some throws in that game where I was just like, he's back. That's who he is. It's a little bit out of structure. It's a little bit off platform. He's converting key downs. That is who Brock Purdy is. And I think that he's headed in the right direction after looking pretty rough the week before with all those interceptions against the Panthers. So that's part of why I put him there. And I think, again, it's a big reason why we have the Niners at 9, because despite all these injuries, they continue to find ways to win football games because they're just disciplined. They show good fundamentals. They execute well. Kyle Shanahan, man, a legit candidate for Coach of the Year.
Man, I'm always putting Chuck on the hot seat with these quarterback rankings. That was Quarterback Keeper, presented by Snapdragon. Learn more at snapdragon.com/laptops. Let's wrap the show with our top 8 in the power rankings. This was an interesting exercise to think about the Lions for me, because in the end, I had the Lions a little higher than you. Like, I still had the Lions over a lot of the AFC playoff teams. And you realize, like, man, even though the Lions have a lot of issues, like a lot of these teams, I'd throw the 49ers in here too. If you put them in the AFC, they got a shot. Like even a down Lions team, like we saw it, they can put 40 on a decent team like the Cowboys. So at 8, but like, man, if you're a Lions fan and in a down season, we think you're the 8th best team in the league in week 15. That's not so bad. We have the Patriots down at 7, probably lower than a lot of places do, although they were tied with the Broncos. So ultimately, those two were tied for 6th. And then the Bills and the Texans tied at 4th. I separated and went with my rankings, had the Bills ahead of the Texans, but we basically had them flip-flopped and very close to each other. And then we had the exact same 1, 2, 3, Rams, Seahawks, and Packers. Let's actually just talk about the Bills and the Texans. I'll talk for myself first. I thought these top 4 teams in the AFC stood apart a little, and they basically were all in the same group: Bills, Texans, Broncos, Patriots. That actually was my order. Shook, how did you feel like you were separating these teams, and how crazy is it that this Texans team, I think, was first for you in the AFC?
Yeah. No, actually, you know who was first for me in the AFC? And I'm going to ding you for this since you're, a Massachusetts guy. I had the Patriots 4th.
Okay.
I was shocked that your ranking dropped them all the way to 7th, but hey, maybe I'm the homer here. It's tough to, I kind of wanted to give them credit for what they've accomplished. I didn't necessarily and rightfully evaluate it as like, all right, let's put them on a neutral field. Who do I think is going to win? Because like, that's what drove the rest of my evaluation here with the Bills and the Texans and the Broncos. The Bills are looking about the best that they have all year. I think that every team in this group is flawed in one way or another, but I do like the momentum that they're building and the direction they're headed in. Obviously, it starts with Josh Allen, but I've seen some interesting performances from their defense. They've been opportunistic like they were against the Bengals. They absolutely shut down the Chiefs when they played them. So they've had some good performances. The Texans have the best defense in the NFL, and I think that will travel and could beat anybody on any given day. The Broncos are a team that I think is also headed in the right direction. Bo Nix has encouraged me over the last few weeks, but I do see some flaws in them, namely in their running game, leaning too much on RJ Harvey, who's a rookie. And I know that they have a good defense, but I have a little bit of nervousness. I can't quite, it's some trepidation. I can't quite trust them in certain scenarios against other teams, but I still like the makeup of their team overall. So that's why they land where they are. Patriots, more than anything, is, like I said, just rewarding them for what they've done, and also all the faith in the world in none other than Mr. Drake May.
Of course. And to me, they're all very close. And if the Patriots win this Sunday, obviously, they'll be even higher on a list like this. To me, you can't separate them much. But I really think this whole Texans to the Super Bowl bandwagon is going to get a lot of people on it over the next month, because they have the Cardinals and the Raiders next. They have the Chargers offensive line on the road. That's by far their hardest game of the season left. That's actually an NFL Network exclusive game. We have one more game this season. That's a Saturday afternoon game, and it's going to be really interesting. And they finish up with the Phillip Rivers Colts. They are not going to lose 2 more games the rest of the season. They are going to get to 11-6 at worst, and there's a pretty decent chance they win all 4 of those games. It's tough to win every week in the NFL, so I could see a surprise, but there's a real scenario. They win that division, that they are the 2 or the 3 seed, and a lot of people are looking at that defense as the best thing going in the AFC going into the playoffs. Let's wrap just going over. We agreed. I think it's a pretty clear top 3. Rams, Seahawks, Patriots. I really think Seahawks are getting slept on a little bit nationally as like right there with the Rams, and I have them over the Packers. So did you, as like maybe the best team in the NFL. I know we got to see it with Darnold and everything, but we don't have superpower teams this year. I think the Rams are the closest to it, and they have a chance to really prove it over the next 6 days here by beating the Lions and the Seahawks. If they can do that, they can enter the playoffs as a real deal, like super favorite. Other than that, I think these 3 teams are going to kind of be the teams going into the NFC playoffs.
They're going to beat the Lions, just because I think the Lions' limitations are going to prevent them from keeping up with the Rams. That Seahawks game is going to tell us a lot about these 2 teams. It is a bummer that I think the best 2 or 3 teams in the NFL all reside in the same conference, but it's not the first time that we've been here. However, Greg, I would like you to enlighten the listeners and the viewers. What was the text that I sent to you around midnight Eastern on Tuesday going into Wednesday?
You told me the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl in some form or fashion.
Yeah. Because
I can't remember the exact words, but that was the takeaway.
I believe I might have ended it with book it. That's how confident I am in the Rams right now. In a year in which every team is flawed top to bottom in one way or another, there is, like you said, no more complete team than the Los Angeles Rams. And yes, I was watching them take the Cardinals behind the woodshed. And that, that's not a measuring stick game. But it was one of those games where you saw elite passing from Matthew Stafford. You saw an incredible rapport between him and Puka Nacua and him and Devontae Adams, and even the tight end group, because they love to run that 13 personnel, which we know Jordan loves to talk about, and for good reason, because it makes them so multiple and they're hard to defend. But as a team, top to bottom, front to back, defense, offense, special teams had a little bit of issue with kicker. They just look like the strongest contender to win the Super Bowl. It is not a situation in which, I think back to the 2016 Falcons, late in the regular season, I was confident they were going to win the NFC, and they did. And Matt Ryan was going to win MVP, and he did. And ultimately, they lost that Super Bowl. But they're not quite there, but they're about as close as you can get in this league right now to a team that gives me that much confidence, because they have the quarterback, they have an explosive, dynamic running back in Kyren Williams, they got a good spell back in Blake Corum, they have an offensive line that is absolutely dominating in the trenches, they have talented pass catchers, they have a defense that's highly underrated and can win in the trenches as well. And all of that combined can travel and win anywhere, home or on the road. And as it stands right now, they're not going to have to go on the road as long as they beat the Seahawks in that Thursday night or next week.
That will be tough. We're going to go live on YouTube next week for the first time on Thursday night. I think Jordan Rodriguez joining me for that one. Shookie's got the night off, so that's going to be fun. Join us live. We're going to do something different, because that's just a fun game. It matched up schedule-wise. Let's hit that music. Thank you, Shook. Big week. Shook's not done. He's going to be back on Saturday. We're doing the all underrated defense with Ollie Connolly. But before that, got a special treat in the feed. We've mentioned it all week. I hope everyone can check it out. Power Players with Jordan Rodriguez, a new series that we're doing that goes up on Friday. We will see you then.